Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Hello and welcome to the 1 hour later than normal Down with D&D, thanks to Daylight Savings Time. And I am your host, Sean Merwin, along with the co-host, the Alpha Stream himself, Mr. Teos Abadia.
Hello, Sean. How are you doing, my friend?
I am feeling well rested.
All right. Yeah, that extra hour is tasty.
Or something like that.
Let's do it every week.
Yeah, I think we should turn back. That'd be good. Hopefully we could get some of our life and our hair back.
Yeah, I could use any of that.
Either.
Especially last night I stayed up doing environmental real world job work, and I could use an extra hour now.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get your adrenaline flowing as we talk D&D with everyone out there.
Oh, man, there's some groundbreaking news. Yeah.
There's a lot of groundbreaking news, not necessarily D&D rules related, but D&D business related. The first is that Critical Role has announced that they are creating their own publishing company called Darrington Press. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff to unpack. We'll just take a couple minutes to do so, but there are some people that say Critical Role is partially or even a good part behind 5e's success with the audience that it brought in. And so now they are turning things around and making their publishing company to go along with their stream. Do you want to talk a bit about the news there?
Yeah, I mean, so Ivan Van Norman is the person heading up Darrington Press. He co-owns Hunters Entertainment, which has a strong track record of launching big Kickstarters, including licensed deals. He has been involved in this space heavily, big, friend, part of the whole network of LA people there. Matthew Mercer is the creative advisor. We have Darcy Ross of Monte Cook Games. How awesome is the publishing marketing manager? So she had announced she was leaving Monte Cook Games quite happily and sadly. It was very so it says a lot about a company when both sides are sort of like sharing their tears online about someone having to leave. And so you could kind of sense Darcy is doing something cool. What is it? And here it is, right? Yeah. So she will be the publishing marketing manager. A number of other people shared that they're being involved. It was sometimes hard to figure out in what capacity, but there are a number of people that are working on games or otherwise involved in marketing, editing, things like that.
Yeah. They also announced a slate of products, nothing specific or not too specific in the long term, but they're going to have their own online shop for the US, UK, and Australia, as well as selling things in gaming stores. What did you think of that slate of products?
It's pretty interesting. Immediately when you hear this announcement, I think most people are going like, oh, you're going to offer a Critical Role RPG.
Right. And
then you look at the slate and you go, oh, okay, it's a board game with a name that looks a lot like Kuotoa, but it's Ukotoa. That looks fun. Okay, so it's a board game. Then Critical Role Adventures, a cooperative legacy light game. Okay, it is Critical Role related, but it's like a card board type legacy game. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then a Syndicult RPG, which is supposed to be some sort of light narrative heavy RPG. Mm-hmm. And then Guardians of Matrimonia, a cooperative card game. And these could all be great, but it's very interesting that it's not sort of, what you'd think would be the elephant in the room would be Critical Role announcing the Critical Role RPG. So maybe they're gathering steam for that and working on the background. I can't imagine that that's never going to come to the fore.
Right.
But it'll be cool to see it. They've got, if you go to the website, you can see they've got all sorts of beautiful pictures of the art from these games and things like that. And so I think as long as these games are halfway fun, mm-hmm. with the audience that they have, they'll see a lot of success here.
Yeah, my first thought was the same. Why isn't there the Critical Role role-playing game? And Yeah, I'm wondering then how the Wildmount book sold for Wizards.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that had anything to do with it. If the sales for that did not reach the heights that they had hoped, maybe they saw that we need to go in a different direction to sell to our established audience base.
So I have so many thoughts on that. I don't know how much time I want to spend on it, but the quick version of it, I feel is, well, Wildemount was hit by COVID, right? And
Right,
so it's
sure.
very hard to tell what may have existed there, but it's somewhat similar to Acquisitions Incorporated. You know, that you and I are very familiar with seeing that and looking at the sales of it. And I think that for all these things, if Wizards isn't going to support it,
Mhm.
if there isn't a continual emphasis, something that's just pushing it periodically, then those kinds of releases will fade into the background. It's true of Theros. It's true of all these things that are kind of, if they escape the cycle,
Mhm.
what you have to do to keep people playing, if you want Wildemount going on all the time, is you need some sort of organized type play program. You need some sort of support that's happening to continually keep people focused. It also has to be part of what Wizards mentions, right? When Wizards talks about a new release, they should talk about what they learned from Theros or Wildemount or Acquisitions Incorporated and keep moving that in, so it's part of the reality of what they're constantly mentioning. And if it's not, then that can fade, right? And it's harder to sustain those sales.
Yeah. So it will be interesting to keep an eye on that venture, both in terms of the role-playing game D&D ties, as well as just what products that they come out with as an independent publishing company.
Yeah, I mean, for the hobby, I think this is great, right?
Yeah, I mean, more games is more better, and if you bring more people into gaming, there will be more people out there who you can play games with.
Yeah, and while I don't know, they have not released any information on what they pay or whatever, you feel like this is the kind of group that can afford to pay people properly.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not doing that, I don't know, but it's another entity that can, because they know how to come at the industry from a different angle.
Sure. Yep. Also up, the new Unearthed Arcana article is up with 2 new subclasses: the Way of the Ascendant Dragon for monks and the Drake Warden for rangers. I kept trying to say Draken Ward, which I think is actually cooler than Drake Warden. So we're not going to go too in depth on these tonight or today, because we want to get to our main topic and get through the final 4 towns today. But it's pretty much what it says. The Way of the Ascendant Dragon and monk subclass that emulates the power of dragons. The ranger subclass, the Drake Warden, gives you a ranger with a Drake companion and also gives your ranger some dragonish abilities. And just as I read it through it, I'm thinking, this is all cool. I feel like we're starting to see things sort of, everything's blurring now. I think, but if you've bought products on the DMs Guild, and if you've purchased all the Wizards products, and if you've purchased some third-party products with subclasses, I feel like we've hit a saturation point for certain themes, and I feel like now we're just kind of shuffling powers around, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just I'm hoping, like, when Tasha's is released, we really see some new and exciting things, as opposed to just, okay, we're going to stick this sort of power on all of the races to make subclasses. And that's my fear with, like, psionics, is it just becomes these new powers where you do psychic damage and everyone does it, and there you go. So it's tough to design new rules, especially, how far are we into 8 years into this edition? It's going to be interesting to see. And does this tell you what is coming? we have 2 dragon things coming out.
Yeah.
So, is there a dragon theme thing?
What was that box set? The dragon, you play dragons?
Council of Worms?
Yeah, Council of Worms confirmed.
Yes, exactly. Dragon
yeah.
Jammer. Yeah.
Dragon Jammer. I hear what you're saying. I think part of it is when you're building these things, you don't want to exceed the different bounds, right? And so if you look at the original player's handbook subclasses, you kind of go, okay, at third level, there's sort of these 3 different ways of handling it.
Yep.
And then as designers start playing with it, they're like, maybe there are these 5 different ways, but you still kind of don't want to stray too far from that. Or someone finds out, here's how I can this is such an obviously better choice. I can break this, or it's just, and so, you want to go back to that original sort of way of designing each of those different levels. And it's hard to vary from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then a lot of it is sort of, there's a skin on it, which is the concept. And that's often, very gratifying, but also the features must be gratifying and somehow different, but not stronger, not weaker. And that's a hard task to pull off the longer and longer you go. It also ends up being that I think originally your subclasses will be things that are iconic and they fit in any game. And as you go, then you start saying like, well, I'm totally half dragonish. And someone goes, I don't know that I want that in my campaign.
Yeah.
And I think that's the harder thing is that, and it's true with the races, right? With Volos and I'm sure with Tasha's, you end up with all these races and someone wants to play a Furbo, another person a Kenku, and it's just, and then you go, wow, what happened to iconic D&D?
Yeah.
And so that's where you have to go back to campaigns, right? And content and say, well, here are the options that we're going to have when we play this game so that you get that feel back.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've always talked about when you design new rules, you want them to be flavorful, balanced and cool.
Yeah.
And so what's the story behind these things? It can be just as important to certain game groups as the mechanics themselves. And so if the story behind them isn't cool, then it's just one more skin over a ranger.
And it has to be a good skin is the important part. The story must be compelling, and then your features must correctly enforce it. I think that's the trickiest part of subclass design is that it really has to be that good feeling that things are that this is true. This narrative that we've thrown over it really is cohesive and tangible in play.
Yep.
Hard.
And and so what's the Drake Warden who summons this Drake, the small dragon, basically? What's the story behind that? Where's the drama? What is the hook? All of those things. And maybe it will be great. We don't know. But you, dear listener, can go download those 2 new subclasses, play with them, give them your attention. And I'm sure that if not by the time this episode drops soon, there will be a survey up for you to take.
Yeah.
And that moves us to our next bit of news. Hasbro's Q3 earnings call. This is always something that I'm interested in seeing, how Hasbro's doing financially and where Wizards of the Coast in general and D&D specifically fits into that role. And for those of you who have been fans for years and years and years, generally it doesn't. Generally, we would not hear anything about
it
D&D.
took forever. Yeah.
Sometimes they would mention Magic, just in terms of how much money they're printing with it, but never D&D. And now for probably the 10th, 11th straight quarter, D&D is mentioned specifically. Even with COVID, D&D is up more than 20% for the quarter and year to date. And that's good because you never know how something like a pandemic will affect earnings, affect people's ability to spend. But that's not the coolest thing that was mentioned, I think. Teos, do you want to take it from there?
Sure, gladly. So they said the team is busy working on the Dungeons and Dragons live action feature film, which is like, okay, yeah, we've heard that. That's this, movie's been being worked at various levels for a long time, and it was announced that it's delayed due to COVID, so it's still going on. So we're working on a couple of different approaches because there's so much mythology in canon to Dungeons and Dragons for live action television.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there's been very strong interest. We've talked about how many global streamers, blah, blah, blah. D&D is a strong brand. But wait, what? You said film first, and then you said television, and they have not taken this back. So live action TV D&D series coming.
Yeah, that's confirmed.
Confirmed. Yeah.
It's got to be Spelljammer too. And
they're too cowardly for that and smart.
Yes, but it's funny because as we sat here over the years and saw Netflix rise and saw Amazon Prime rise, and now there's all sorts of content streaming services, Apple, who else? The Peacock, all of these are new, Disney, and we saw Witcher, right? We saw shows made that are basically D&D shows.
Yeah.
That
Game of Thrones.
That could. Well, yeah, that's a big one. But could just as easily have been a Dungeons and Dragons show. And so I'm surprised we haven't seen more. But this tells me that yes, they are considering it more strongly based on the interest in D&D from the various streams and broadcasts and podcasts and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting.
Yep. The latest release on the DM's Guild of interest from Baldman Games is the next Moonshae Isles trilogy. I know for a fact that Baldman Games is going to be working to release a backlog of Moonshae Isles adventures. So if you are into the Moonshaes, or if you are an Adventurers League player who is looking for more Adventurers League content, these are there. This one is near and dear to my heart because when the DM's Guild first started, Wizards reached out to creators to put up some content. And with my friends at Encoded Designs, we created an adventure called The 5 Temples of the Earth Mother, Life and Moon. And the idea was Life and Moon would be the first 2 of these 5 temples. And then life got in the way, and then other things got in the way, and we didn't release the last 3 temples. One of the reasons was because Baldman Games took over ownerships, quote unquote, of the Moonshae Isles. So we wanted to wait and let them be the publisher for the final 3 temples. And these came out at least a year and a half ago, if not longer, at a convention. But with just the backlog of things, they were not released, but they have been released now. So you can get the Temple of Death, the Temple of the Sun, and the Temple of the Beast on the DM's Guild. And keep an eye out for even more Moonshae content from Baldman Games coming down the pipe soon.
Yeah, and I've played all of those. I played them at Origins whenever they came out. They were great, really, really a lot of fun. And I owned the 5 Temples of the Earth Mother that was originally put out, so it was fun for me as well to see that.
Yep. So if you have been cursing my name specifically because you played that first adventure 5 years ago or whenever it came out, they're there now. You can stop cursing my name. You can curse someone else.
We'll never stop cursing your name, Shawn.
This is true. And speaking of Adventurers League, Teos, you have an announcement about the AL rules updates.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure things out because the rules where you find them has changed. So it used to be you'd go to the AL website and you'd get your rules for how to play AL. That makes a lot of logical sense. And then they said, you know what, we've got this DM's Guild thing. That's where you actually get the adventures. So let's put the rules there. And that made a lot of sense. But now none of those are the places where you get the AL rules. You get them on the official Dungeons and Dragons Discord channel. Okay. So that's a little complicated, but that's where they are now. They will also be put on the D&D website, but the Wizards of the Coast site. But apparently there's a delay, in when those arrive there as well.
Yeah.
But one thing you can do is if you do use Discord to run games or things like that, you can go to the AL updates channel, which is in the D&D Adventures League section of the D&D Discord. And you can click the follow button and put that on to have it automatically copy over any announcements that go in that AI updates channel can go to your Discord channel. So I've done that for the Discord channel where my buddies and I, that we often play AL stuff together. we now get those updates automatically, so I don't have to go to that enormously busy Dungeons and Dragons Discord channel. I can just get the updates flowing through. So there's been a number of releases recently, news-wise, which if you didn't know about all these changes and haven't gone to this Discord channel, you probably don't know about. There is a new version of the DM's Guide, version 10. This tells you how to play Rime of the Frost Maiden and Plague of the Ancients, which is the name for their new Season 10 campaign that supports Rime, Plague of Ancients. The Player's Guide is version 10.2. So if you've got old guides, time to go out and find the new ones on the Discord channel or on the Wizards site when they get there. And just to back up a bit, which will make more sense with the other things we're going to talk about, let's step back and say, well, what are the flavors of ale you can play right now? And there are basically 4. One is your seasonal campaign, and this is I think the easiest to understand, which is that D&D puts out an official hardback, Rime of the Frost Maiden, and there's accompanying play, and that's your season. So this is season 10. It's called Plague of Ancients, and it's a storyline that sort of follows along with a lot of what Rime is doing as a book, but it's separate from the book. So you can play the book as official AL, or you can play this Plague of Ancients campaign. All of those start with the nomenclature DDAL 10 and then some number, 01, 02, etc. So you know that that's the official AL 10 season. Yep. The one thing about this is if you start playing in your Plague of Ancients, the Rime campaign, and you leave, you can't come back. You have migrated out of it. And so that's sort of an interesting thing, is that this whole seasonality aspect. Now, what you can leave too, let's talk about those things. So you have the Masters campaign. This is mostly high-level play, at least 5th level up. And this is the Dreams of the Red Wizards is the current high-level play campaign. Those will have DRW in the naming convention, Dream of Red Wizards. And then everything that was done before, old seasons, all of the things that used to be the program called CCC, the community-created content or convention-created content, Moonshaes Isles, things like that, those are called historic campaign, even though some of them may be active. That's all in the historic campaign area. So if you were playing season 10 and then you did one of these 2 things, you would not come back to season 10. That's the most important thing to know. The last one is the Eberron campaign. This is a separate adjunct campaign. Shawn's one of the admins, called Oracle of War. Amazing campaign, really good. And this is a self-contained campaign. Simply create your Eberron character following the rules for that campaign guide and play and have an awesome time. It's incredible.
Yep. And the Oracle of War documents for rules have been updated to version 1.4. So that's the new rules for the Oracle of War campaign if you're playing that. The couple of the most important things, you can now rebuild your character up to level 10. So that is essentially going to take care of when Tasha's comes out and people were saying, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? Just rebuild your character. If you want to use Tasha's, go ahead. That's
great. I love that kind of flexibility.
Yep.
Another thing on the Masters side, so the high level play side, a new 6-hour-long Red Wizards adventure for Tier 3 by MT Black. And this is DRW06 called Thimble Rigging. I love MT Black. I look forward to seeing this. I am not a big fan of 6-hour adventures, even independent of this being the online gaming era, because a 6-hour online game is going to be like a 10-hour, if not longer, experience. But 6 hours, I loved the 4th edition Epic campaign. I read it. I know a handful of people who actually managed to play it, but those I think were 8-hour adventures. Maybe they were 6. There was something really obnoxiously long. It was impossible to play it. Like it's really hard to get people together for 4 hours. 6, that's a tall order. So I hope they'll reconsider it, because I want more people playing. I'm sure this is a really cool adventure, and I will definitely buy it and read it. But I'm probably not running a 6-hour adventure, and I'm probably not alone in that.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because I think people who have been playing 5th edition for a while now recognize how long these Tier 3 and Tier 4 adventures run normally. So you can't tell much of a story because of the weight of the encounters themselves. So I can understand that desire to make a 6-hour adventure to fit in, 3 hours of story. that you would normally get from a tier 1 or tier 2 adventure. But it does, especially when you're running online. You almost have to divide it up into multiple sessions,
Right.
which is a hard thing to do with a home group.
Well,
much
yeah.
less with
And
an
that's
organized play campaign.
And in theory, you can say, hey, let's just split in half. It's 2 3-hour adventures. That's totally reasonable. But I now need to do it with the same exact people. And the whole point of organized play is that flexibility where you can say, hey, Sue is going to play in this adventure, in the next adventure it's Sally, but we all can play, and Sally can catch the part she missed later, and it all works.
Yep.
Yeah. So the next thing is Dungeon Craft Adventures. This is a brand new thing. It's kind of, if you're familiar with the Oracle of War salvage missions, it's like that. It's a set of rules called Dungeon Craft that allows you to create your own 2 or 4 hour adventures that are tied to the new Season 10 Plague of Ancients Icewind Dale campaign.
Mm-hmm.
This basically replaces the CCC program where conventions were creating play. Now it's going straight to the DM's Guild, and anybody can have a piece of it, including you, the listener. You follow these rules that are available now on the Discord channel, and you can create your 2 or 4 hour adventure following those things. They give you a list of monsters you can use. One of the strangest things, you have to use one of their adventure seeds, and there's this list of adventure seeds by tier, and you have to use one of those. I find that kind of strange, but okay. So you hopefully like one of those, and hopefully don't make something that's just like what someone else makes based off of it. But you make this adventure and you put it on the DM's Guild, and people can buy it, and everybody can play it. There's no review done by the admins, and I'm sure that's a big part of this, why this was done as a program. Before, all the CCCs had to be at some point read over, and there was some responsibility there. Now it's your job to be following the codes of conduct that exist for writing and the standards, and if somehow we find that they're off, well, your adventure can get pulled and you'll get no money for all your effort. So it's on you to do it, but the admins aren't going to be reading over it or fixing it up or anything like that.
Yeah.
The strangest thing to me about this program is that until published, only the authors, maximum of 2 people, can run the adventure. I'm sorry, how are you enforcing that? Yeah,
I mean,
I can run D&D content however I want. Are you going to stop me? I thought that was very strange.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is sort of a copyright issue where you cannot use Forgotten Realms material. You cannot, this is my understanding. I am not a lawyer. I did not play one on TV. You cannot create content using Wizards' intellectual property and then distribute it.
But you can't distribute it until you publish it.
Right, exactly. That's why you need to publish it.
Yeah.
Then you have the tacit permission of Wizards of the Coast because you're putting it up on the site, which is legal to then use their IP.
Well, and that's where this should then say you can't distribute it, because I mean, I can create a homebrew adventure featuring Spelljammer and Mordenkainen and Elminster, and I can run it online every day of the week, and nobody can stop me from doing that. It's my game. I'm not publishing it. I'm not, sharing it. I'm just running the game.
And
so
that's
it's
why
weird. It's a little bit of strange.
But isn't that exactly what the rule says? It says you can write something and you can run it yourself all you want, but nobody else can.
It says you can. Well, I see what you're saying. So because if someone else ran it, then I distribute it.
You will have distributed it.
So that's how they're saying don't distribute, because it has to be you. Okay.
Right. And then other places have gotten around this rule by saying, well, we're going to create a living Dark Sun campaign and we're not going to distribute it, but these 72 people wrote it.
Sure.
And so we can all run it at Gen Con because we all wrote it. And so that's why they limit it to 2 people.
Yeah, good call. You've talked me off the ledge, Sean, I believe.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, it's just
Yeah, so that's what it is. It's like saying you can't distribute it, but it's done a certain way that's clever. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So a lot of changes there.
Yep. And there's always a period of time when you review the rules. Everyone talks about them, and I understand why all these changes have been made, and I'm sure we will talk about them more going down the line. But Monte Cook Games, speaking of Monte Cook Games earlier, has released Numenera Monsters for 5th edition, Beasts of Flesh and Steel. 140 new monsters with science fiction elements, with a wide range of CRs, all the way up to 30. You have this book because you backed the Kickstarter.
I did. I did it. I think it was part of another. There was a Kickstarter that involved a number of things, including this. This book has the amazing art and layout of all Monte Cook products, where you're looking at, you're just like, this is just gorgeous, and it's just start to finish beautiful. It is very well done, and what I like about it is it's very creative, because they're taking the monsters they created for Numenera and they're making them into 5e. And one of the virtues of doing that is, the rule set's so different, and their rule set is very creative and imaginative and open in terms of what a creature can do. So then when you have to codify it using 5th edition, you come up with some really creative elements. And so if you're looking for monsters that are unique, and they're not all, it's not like they're all like, a half computer, half crab, though one of them is. There are a lot of things that are, undead-like or ooze-like or plant-like, or any, would fit in a lot of settings, in addition to other things that are very sci-fi. And so you'll get really, really creative and different monsters. So if you want to surprise your players, this is an excellent way to do it. The hardcover is 45, the PDF is 18, but it's huge. It's 140 new monsters, and the CRs go all the way up to 30. And I think there are probably maybe more than 20 above CR9. So it's a very good mix. It's not like one of those books that often has a bunch of low level and then a couple. Like, it has a lot of very high CR creatures that are cool.
Interesting.
There's also a free preview that you can get from their website.
Yeah, I will be buying this book because I am very interested at this point in monsters and ways to make monsters where it's not just they do 1d6 plus 3 damage and may knock you prone, right? Looking for those things that can surprise the players without overwhelming the players. So I am definitely going to be looking at this for that. And Justice's Guide to the DM's Guild. I have not looked at this yet, Teos.
Oh, man, you will love it when you look at it. Justice Arman, he wrote a guide to publishing on the DM's Guild. And it speaks to who he is as a person. This is one of these, like, let me help as much as I can, dear reader, kind of articles. That's just a guide to the things that Justice has learned in becoming a powerhouse publishing on the DM's Guild. Working with other groups, how do you find art? How do you find layout? How do you find an editor? You name it. It walks from beginning to end of everything you need to know about how to get started in the DM's Guild. And it's a fantastic article. So if you're all interested in self-publishing, even not on the DM's Guild, this is a great article to look at.
Okay. I will also be checking that out. And with the news out of the way, we've got some traveling to do. We have 4 towns to visit to finish chapter 1. So we're going to jump right in hard with Goodmead.
All right, Goodmead. So if you choose, this is what I would say is one of the cool starting towns. Like, it's a good one to start with because of a very important plot element that's going on here. Goodmead has lost their speaker, the mayor-like figure. So friendliness 2 snowflakes, services 1, comfort 2. And Goodmead is known for its ale. It's nestled between the Redwaters and an evergreen forest. And here they bother to actually tell you, how is it that you're making mead? Well, they have a bunch of bees in the mead hall. Mm-hmm. They have a shrine to Tempest. They now called the Shrine of the Flaming Sword. The population is 100, which is, compared to other towns, doing fairly well, down from 150 in 4 years due to this brutal winter. Mm-hmm. And one of the neat pieces of lore is that it's founded by immigrants from Chult and the Vilhan Reach. Mm-hmm. So it's quite a diverse town compared to the others. And that's all brand new lore. The speaker, Kendrick Reelsbarrow, is dead. He was killed by a Berbeeg who stole beer. And because of this, there are 2 things going on. One is the quest to seek revenge on this. And the second is an election. And here we have 2 candidates, dwarf logger Shandor Froth. who is a middle-aged woman descended from Chultan founders.
The second
that's
person.
the second. Sorry, dwarf logger Shandar Froth, or the middle-aged woman descended from Chultan founders named Alavesa Untapur. She's a cask maker. The kicker here is that Shandar, the dwarf logger, is in league with the Zentarim, blackmailed for murder they know he committed. And this feels to me a lot like what you wrote in the Acquisitions Incorporated book with the election, where there's the obvious bad guy, the person who's reluctantly running. And in fact, here it says, hey, I'm only running for the good of the town, is what Olivessa is saying. How about you run instead?
Yep.
And I think, this could be a super fun thing to do, to have the characters care about 10 towns, is to give them a town, right? Like have one of them fall into running Goodmead. I mean, who doesn't want to run a brewery as part of it too? So I just think this would be a super fun thing to do. And then you can have lots of Zent intrigue and fun, and they have a home base and they'll care about the towns more. So this is one of my picks for towns to absolutely visit, if not start in and try to call home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when I read that, I thought the same thing. When I ran the Acquisitions Incorporated game, we had a whole session pretty much where they were campaigning one of the PCs for mayor, and they're still, 20 sessions later, they're still like handing out vote for Schmott stickers, right, to everybody they meet, even though the election's long gone. So it was great fun. It may be a little less fun depending on how things go this week, but it still could be a really great part of a campaign, especially a campaign can be very dark. To have a little bit of this success, have a little bit of light, have a little bit of hope, would be great.
Well, and in campaigns, the other things, you want characters to sort of own things and come up with ideas, and if you can just get them to bite on running, with this plea from Olivessa, I think characters will unfold and the players will unfold a list of desires and wants, and you will build from here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so what is the quest that starts in Goodmead?
The quest is, hey, our speaker was killed while loading casks, and it says a comment that's something along the lines of like, they care more about the ale than they do about the dead speaker. But tough downs. Yep. So you kind of go off and you run into a trapper who has found 5 dead militia who were trying to look into this thing. And then the trapper has a fox, and you can kind of buy it, which is kind of a fun twist here. And if you do, later it helps, because when you start marching on towards where the tracks lead, a Chewinga throws snowballs at you. And the fox, if present, goes to it, and they sort of become fast friends, and the Chewinga rewards you. If not, the Chewinga follows you but does not reward you. So there's sort of this benefit if you freed the fox. I think that's all very cute. It's a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. It's at this point that I sort of realized, hey, all the maps have been in color, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, the maps have been beautiful.
Beautiful maps, yeah. So then you get to the Verbeeg lair. This is similar to what we saw in Dugan's Hole. You have 3 entrances, and even a 4th can be found if you really look around. The Verbeeg is named Doug, D-U-H-G. I thought that was very funny.
That was funny. Uh-huh.
And it's possible to do a number of things here. I don't think it's really clear. I always wish when adventures have really cool things, but they're probably not going to happen, do that extra work to make it more likely that they happen, because that's the fun.
I know just what you're talking about. Are you talking about the animals?
Yeah, the livestock.
Yeah. So can I tell?
Yeah,
this?
please.
So this Verbeeg has this strange attachment and love of this livestock that he keeps, and the players can essentially say, back off, Verbeeg, or your sheep gets it.
Yeah.
But there's no way for you to know that. It's not something the characters would do, right? You're not going to run up and threaten the sheep when faced with this Verbeeg. So you need to do something as the DM to let them know, like have the Verbeeg having painstakingly made collars for each of them.
Yes.
Or something.
Yeah, the names about their pens or something like that. Yeah.
Right. Something that you would not expect. That's more than just a funny little aside or it can be a funny little aside, but it draws the attention of the characters
Yeah.
to pay attention. And then your quick thinking or your really imaginative players gives them something to latch onto. And you don't even have to have a battle then.
Right.
If you could make this a role-playing scene, a socialization scene, as the characters in the Verbeeg haggle over the lives of these livestock and the mead that he stole.
Yeah, and I was thinking something like tiny animal toys, but I had the same thought of like,
Right.
there's got to be some way that you tip your players off to this so that they can enjoy this fantastic idea that's in here of the Verbeeg, being afraid of the livestock being harmed. There's some good humor with the ogre. So the Verbeeg, there's also an ogre in the lair, and it cannot remember its own name. Because of this, the Verbeeg will call the ogre friend. So when it attacks shouting, "Me, friend!" I'm your friend. Wham!
Yeah.
I think that's great. If this place can be brutally dangerous, so depending on the path you take, and then there's not a lot that points you like, "Hey, this is the good." You made a good call. It's not like it's choice rewarded or anything. It's just if you end up going a certain path, you can fight an ogre, Verbeeg, and cave bear in the same combat.
Right.
And the cave bear, to continue ridiculous naming, is called Yogobor, which is clearly Yogi Bear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's a tough combat for like even third level characters.
Oh, yeah.
That's tough. And then after all of it's over, you're like, okay, whew, that's done. But
yeah, so when even before, when you leave, you are gonna run into Gog the Verbeeg, who is showing up to see her love Doug. And Gog is if you have killed Doug, you will now fight another Verbeeg who's mad that their lover has been killed. They also carry a basket of metal from another world and can tell the party about a crashed vessel. Spelljammer confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
There's some other things that are here. There's a statue of Sylvanus that's pretty neat. That's got a lot of fun. And it can allow you to do greater restoration. And one of the things that's important with something like this is that you can only get the benefit once. So a way that you can learn of it, which obviously identify will work, but if you can learn a bit of this benefit so that you can come back to it when needed, I think that's really useful. I would do that as a DM to try to reward it.
Yeah.
They have some cursed treasure in here. There's some nice angles. I like a lot of this, and just all I would say about it is to make sure that that you don't not get those great elements, and so that's kind of important. When you get back, Olivessa is going to ask you to run for speaker. If they do, then there are a couple of events that can come into play. The Zents come, and there's a sort of setup where the other guy that's running, Shandar, makes it look like he's fighting off the Zents, but you can see through that. I would like a little more help here with how to do this. It's just sort of it's like a paragraph and a bit describing that this will happen, but it doesn't give you a lot of guidance on running it. So I think it's easy if you're running, this session and okay, so a bunch of 8 thugs show up to fight. But you want to take that time here because this is really important, especially if you want to see characters take an active interest in the town, to think through this combat and not the fight part of it, but the resolution of it, the ability to sense that this is the setup, and to then get involved in the politics of exposing this setup and probably being thrust at this point into running for town.
Yeah, this was a fun town to read. I was really pleased with that one.
Yeah.
Next on our docket is Lonely Wood. So this town has a friendliness of 3 snowflakes, a services of 2, and a comfort of 2. So it's the comfort of 2 I question, because later it says there basically aren't any inns in the town, but the speaker, a halfling commoner named Nimsy Huddle, will let you stay in her heated attic if you need a place to crash for the night. And she also bakes you halfling-shaped cookies. and brings them to you. And she also is famous for taking them to the council of speaker meetings.
I think that's a setup for the future cannibal storyline.
Yes. And all I could think of is, what do halfling shaped cookies look like as opposed to human?
Small humans, yeah.
Huge heads. Is that is that how it works? So Lonely Wood is one of the northernmost towns, and it is on the edge of a forest. And the first thing I thought was, wait, if this is the tundra, no trees grow there. So obviously this is not the tundra. And then I fell down a long rabbit hole where I found out that tundra comes from the Finnish word tunturi, which means a treeless hill. So don't call this area a tundra because there are trees growing there. So obviously it's not the tundra. But Lonely Wood was founded by a Sumbian family. And so it is a quiet town of loggers, fishers, and scrimshanders scratching out a living at the edge of the world. The family crest of the Sembian family that founded the town was a chimera. So there are carvings of dragons, lions, and goats all over the architecture of Lonely Wood, which I thought was really a cool detail. One of the buildings is the Happy Scrimshander. It's a nice little shop selling tools that help you with your scrimshander trade, run by a pleasant spinster assassin. So it is basically a little old lady who was a famous assassin who escaped here years ago.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah. Also, there is a place called the Lucky Liar Tavern that is run by a spy for Saz's Tam. Now, there's no plot in motion here. It doesn't say, and she does this, she does that. No, she's just there, keeping an ear out. So if anyone tries to escape from Saz's Tam to Icewind Dale, she keeps an ear out for them, and then tells on them if she finds them. And then there is Ramshackle, which is a closed inn, and it is the perfect place for the characters to buy a home base if they want. So we can go back to Acquisitions Incorporated here, making your home base. We can
make it your franchise.
We could even go back to Dragon Heist, right? Getting your own getting your own inn. So that's there for you if you want to use in your campaign. The quest that is given to you in Lonely Wood is called the White Moose. And first of all, my party would make all the Rocky and Bullwinkle jokes, Moose and Squirrel, and then they would get into it. So there is a white moose that is attacking loggers in the forest outside of Lonely Wood. Since the logging industry is very essential to not just Lonely Wood, but to all the 10 towns, the speaker asked them to help with the moose problem. She has already dispatched hunters, but it has eluded them, which makes people believe that it might be smarter than a normal moose. So it's also white, making it hard to spot in the snow. What the party doesn't know is that the moose is using a magic mirror, a la a crystal ball, to scry, to show it where its enemies are, to allow it to go immediately to its enemies, attack, and then leave. And that magical mirror will be found later in the thing. So the first thing that the characters have to do is actually find the moose. And there is a terrible exploration method presented. And I apologize for using such harsh words, but it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I could just see players coming over the screen to strangle me if I start this. So the players are looking around for moose tracks. All right, if they succeed on finding the moose tracks, there is a 1 in 6 chance that they actually find the moose. So this is your reward for succeeding, is having a 1 in 6 chance.
Otherwise, it's 1d4 hours spent to find a regular moose.
Right. Otherwise, you spend 1d4 hours finding a regular moose, and then every 3 hours that you're wandering around looking for the moose, there's a chance for a random encounter, and some of them are not easy. There's like a banshee, which can really mess you up. Now, the reason that all of this, it's not stated that that's why it's so hard to find this place, but later you are told that ancient elven magic tricks all aberrations, fiends, giants, humanoids, and undead into veering away from the site where this moose lives, without the slightest inkling that they've been magically misdirected. So I understand that's the story, and that's a cool story. It's hard to show that mechanically without making it very, very frustrating,
Right.
for the players. So I like the idea. I do not like the implementation.
Right. He could have had the players making Arcana checks to realize there's misdirection in players, something that makes them feel right, engaged and smart about it versus thwarted for no reason they can figure out.
Precisely. So along with those survival checks to track, you need, as Teo said, an Arcana check to realize that, the tracks look like they're going this way, but there is some magic that's warping reality here, and you're better off going in that other direction. And that at least gives them the chance. And maybe the first time you make that Arcana check, it's DC 20 at disadvantage, and then they wander around. Then the next time it's DC 10. So now they have a good chance of figuring it out.
You know what I think this is? I mean, it's understanding that time in game is nonsense. It's an architecture, right?
Mm-hmm.
But time out of game is precious. Time as players is precious. And when you force me to possibly, because 1 in 6 does not mean 6 times will be a success, right? I could roll not a 6 or a 1, whatever I decide is going to succeed. And if I don't roll that 1, I could possibly do it 12 times. I mean, that is going to statistically happen in some home group. That 12 times they'll run into this, and which would mean 6 random encounters and days spent tracking this. Yeah. That is playtime and play experience that is supremely frustrating, even though it doesn't really have any consequence on the game time. And so let's just make the playtime rewarding and
make the consequence for failure not lost time and not more random encounters, but something later that's narratively important.
Yeah.
So when they finally do get to this area, it is a really cool place. It's this neat map and neat story behind it. It is basically an old elven construct with a moon dial, like a sundial, but that looks at the phases of the moon. And the characters can run into a lot of cool things here. There are 10 elven statues in the area, and the text tells us if the characters knock over these elven statues, this disorienting effect goes away. And at that point, though, who cares? They never learned about the disorienting effect to begin with as written. So they would at some point find the place, but not necessarily know that they were disoriented. So then toppling it they don't have to come back later. So that doesn't matter. So as the DM, make something happening that toppling them makes a difference, and make it visceral and make it real and make it something that the players will feel good that they've overcome something. Maybe they are under the effect of 1 level of exhaustion until they do it. Now, that's pretty harsh, but that's something that after, if they have a combat or something, then they are able to get rid of that. That's huge. And they feel like, okay, we're smart. We figured that out. We did it. The characters will also see a sarcophagus with with inscriptions on it that are the pieces of a puzzle. So they can solve this puzzle. The inscription shows a what's the word I'm looking for? It's something you build a fire in. Like a little
brazier.
A brazier, thank you. It's a brazier etched in the top of the sarcophagus with these ingredients, and then it shows flames. And there is a brazier near the sarcophagus. So if they take these ingredients, put them in the sarcophagus, or put them in the brazier, light it, the sarcophagus can then be opened, and inside is a mummy. But not a mean mummy. No, it's a nice mummy. It's a nice elven mummy who just wants to go along with the party and do what they say. which, depending how you run it, can be cool, can be fun, or it can just be, yeah, we've got a mummy with us now, and we're going to wreck some things because we have a mummy with us for a while. I would have loved to have seen the mummy have a little bit more backstory, or actually motivation, right? What does the mummy want now, rather than just to do what the players say? We really don't get that. The mummy has also been around for, or it hasn't been around for 1,000 years. So this mummy knew what was going on here in this area 1,000 years ago. Make that mean something. Make that something that the mummy can tell the players. And because the players rescued this mummy, this thing happens, or the mummy can give them information to let something happen cool later in the adventure. I don't know what that is, but
you've also forgotten the most important part about this, which is that the mummy smells like pumpkin spice.
it is true. The mummy does that is a really cool detail, but it doesn't, I laughed when I read that. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but that doesn't change the story that we're going to tell with this adventure.
This is where I want a DM box, like a little sidebar that sort of says, we didn't give you features because we want you to create them based on how the players act, which is what I would do here.
Right.
It's kind of good that you have a little bit of a clean slate, but the reason is because you need to fill it in, right? And maybe give a few ideas for how, but because it is this is a completely wacky idea. And I think some players, some tables will just have the best time ever with this mummy that they're going to have to cover up when they go to town and stuff like that.
Right. And that's a great point. Right. Because this adventures are stories. They're technical documents as well. And there's always that balance between the two. And here there's a potential for a great story, but the technical document does not tell newer DMs or DMs that need a little help how to make that story flow, how to make it really sing. The rest of this area, there is a winter druid who awakened this moose and is seeking revenge on the 10 towns for the death of her sister. And to be honest, that's sort of the least cool thing about this whole thing, because she doesn't want to talk. As soon as the characters enter her chamber, she just rushes to attack. She does have an awakened shrub who hides, so the players can gain an ally essentially in this awakened shrub who sprouts berries to please whoever he's serving at the time. And
it's a really sad tale of the shrub. It's kind of funny.
Yeah,
I love the shrub angle. There's some fantastic design in here. Really, I love that shrub.
Right. The shrub is more compelling than the bad guy.
Foe. Yeah, right. That's true.
And so it is interesting. I love the area. I loved the buildup. I wish that the bad guy had been more interesting.
And you're going to find her twin sister rotting in a sarcophagus, but you're not necessarily going to understand why. I think you would just conclude that she's some crazed follower of Auril.
Right.
But
mm-hmm. There's a story behind her, but the story doesn't mean anything to what's happened before or what's going to happen later, really. So, if you can find a way to make that more meaningful, give it some depth, then this is a really great little quest, I think. Shall we travel to Targos?
Targos is well known, if you read the novels, as being sort of the contrarian town of sort of, we're going to fight, we're going to do it this way, and the rest of the towns can bow to us. Targos is, like Bryn Shander, encircled by a wooden wall. It has 2 snowflakes for friendliness, 3 snowflakes for services, 2 for comfort. The quest here is mountain climb. It has 1,000 people, which is exactly the same it used to have.
Nice.
So somehow they're managing to not fall apart. Maybe they bring in people from other towns. They have the biggest fishing fleet. The harbor itself is frozen, but they can go out into the unfrozen portion. And they have a new speaker. The new speaker is Nerith Maxildanar. replaced the old speaker who no longer wanted the job, which is very bizarre to me because that doesn't kind of fit Targos, but okay. But the new speaker is interesting because they are secretly the senior rep for the Zentarum in 10 towns.
Nice.
Senior rep. I like that.
Yep.
And so they are trying to help the Zents rise in power. They're murdering Harpers. They're doing all sorts of stuff to try to undermine things. When I read this, I immediately think like, cool, the players should try to rid them of this evil. There's all this information about this. Clearly, I must undo this. But there isn't a quest to do that, which is I find interesting. Because the kind of player that the character that I would play, and that I think many people would play, would want to undo this thing, but not really much there to support that. Okay. In fact, the quest here, there are a number of decent features to this place. There's the flying snakes are being used by the Zentarum in the little cage and things like that. But let's get to the quest, which is you're walking at some point through town when this sled dog comes running into you and leads you to someone's home, and it's the home of Keegan Velerin. And he is there, but his husband, Garrett, took the sled dogs up the mountain on an expedition with adventurers, and something must have gone wrong for this dog to appear here. And I think he maybe has like a piece of the harness left on him, so he broke away. So Keegan suggests that you go to help find his husband, Garrett, but he suggests you go to Caer Konig and Frozen Far Expeditions, the store there, to get information because he's sure that Garrett would have stopped there. And this can mean that you go through a whole bunch of towns or several towns to then go on your quest. So maybe you like that. Some characters might be like, we don't need no help, let's go. And then you're going to miss some pieces. So you probably want to point them to that as need be. There is also a funny mention here about how sled dogs can shorten the trip, which is not mathematically true according to the rules, but so be it. Now, if you go to Caer Konig, you can find a guide, which seems to be the intention of this quest. You hire Jarthra Farzash as a guide. They give you a suggestion for random wilderness encounter, which could happen in a blizzard. There's a very cool map of the route to climb up Kelvin's Cairn, so you're going actually up the mountain, which is kind of a neat thing that you get to do that. And when you get to the base camp, you find there are other sled dogs here. And I like this. They didn't kill off the dogs, and they explain how they tore into a bag of rations to stay alive. So you find the rest of the dogs are alive. I thought that was very nice. Like that's, not just murdering away the dogs.
And a nice way to give the players dogs without having them buy it. Yeah,
totally. There are mountain goats on the way up, and it's probably worth saying here, if you haven't listened to there are a couple of Dragon Talk interviews with designers and also with Chris Perkins talking about the design of Rime. And apparently the team of writers who start working on all these quests, they somehow developed a thing for goats. So you'll find goats throughout all these encounters, and there was sort of like kind of the inside joke and rallying cry around goats. So there are, again, goats here on the way up. And then you encounter an avalanche. And this is one of these things where we get back to our avalanche rules that we talked about earlier. It's 500 feet away. So on initiative count of 10, it's 200 feet away. And on initiative count 0, you're in it. And there's no way you're going to cross its width. So you're just going to be in it. And if we follow the rules, we then need to know, well, it's going to go till it stops. But nothing tells us when it stops. So, and we don't know anything about what to do with this. So if I'm a DM, even if I sort of remember the avalanche rules, which are kind of too complicated anyway, I'm not going to know what to do. An avalanche hits me. I'm going to call for initiative, but there's no point because you're in it. I'm guessing you just get swept all the way down the mountain. And then you dig out and start over? I don't know. It's a little weird. It gets into that whole avalanche rules thing. Like, yeah, we want to use it, but so I would probably turn this into a skill challenge. I would say, the avalanche is coming down, find refuge, grab onto rocks. You find a piece of rope or something like that someone else used to tether themselves. Something like that would be a little more interesting than just climb back up the mountain. You continue on, and you're going to reach Garrett in the snow. He is exhausted, has 6 hit points left, and then Cragcats attack. cool. I think that's very fun. So you get some answers as to the rest of the group went further on. Now you do some athletics checks to do the rest of the climb. The failure is interesting. If you fail, you waste an hour, and those species who failed get 1 level of exhaustion, but only those that failed.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, exhaustion is a tough thing to go with, but so it goes.
Yeah.
Then you finally get to the cave. Mama Yeti and a Yeti tyke are there. And we talked about how you can have these secret origins, right? And like in the previous quest, if you're a doppelganger, that matters. In this quest, if you happen to have the littlest Yeti secret, that's going to be amazing. Like,
Right.
and so again, it comes back to that thing of there are a lot of quests, 10 quests. You're not going to do all 10. So when you're going through the book, if you already know what your character's secrets are, you can, maybe choose ones where it matters and will be interesting. And this is one where if you have that, the scene it's going to be great. The tyke the baby Yeti is playing with the halfling, but the mom will allow you to rescue the halfling if you don't attack. And it's sort of the don't hurt my baby kind of thing. Daddy Yeti will arrive, but you can also work it out with them. So there's some possibilities here. And eventually you get up to the ruined camp, and man, you think like you're gonna end maybe on a high note, so to speak. But it is a gruesome scene with the dead final adventurer plus the dead body of a previous explorer. It is not rewarding at all. So it's one of those just dark kind of moments that it ends on. You get spellbook and a potion of invisibility, but you could change it, like this. If you think through whether this beat is a little too down for you, and you could always have the one person still clinging to life, or if this does feel good, if you like the sort of horror aspect of it, then it will end on this down note, and you'll probably just recover the bodies and bring them back to town.
All right. And last but not least, our final 10 town is Tourmaline, with a friendliness and a comfort of 3 and a services of 2. With a population of 600, Tourmaline was founded by Kalashite settlers who built it on the shore of Mare Dualdan. It is a beautiful town, but it was built in the path of a terrible cold wind from the north. It's mostly populated by fishers and miners, and there is an underdark threat that often emerges because of the mines. The Blue Clam Tavern is just a regular old inn, not much there, a place for rumors. At the East Side Inn, the innkeep Marta wears a ring of warmth, and there's a nice story that goes along with that. It doesn't connect anything else in the adventure, so you might have to work as the DM to get that story in, but you can do so if you want. But let's get into the quest, which is called A Beautiful Mine. As the players come into town, or as they walk through town, a town crier tells of workers that evacuated a nearby mine because of a kobold invasion. The town speaker is called Oris Mastiu, and he will ask them to investigate. What he doesn't tell them is that the town militia is basically revolting. They're not going to do anything he says, and he is facing pretty much an open revolt at this point as speaker. So it's always interesting in an adventure to have something revealed, but then says, don't tell the players. So if you can find a way to play up that bit, if the players like Oris, if you play him as a figure to be pitied or to be helped, then the players may work to help him. If you play him as someone who is weak or a fool, then the players may actually work against him. But that's up to you as the DM, because it doesn't push you in either direction. Right when the players get to the mine, they find that this isn't a normal kobold invasion, because written in common on a sign outside the mine is the words "kobolds only," and there are clues that the kobolds in there might not be what they seem. You get clues as you approach. Basically, the miners who evacuated can give you some hints about that. So that's what you are thinking going in. Room 1, you just see some tracks. Great. There is a part where you can have the PC spend an hour mining, and there's a chance, a very, very slim chance, that they might find a little gem. There is like a 1 in 100 chance that they find a really valuable gem. But I like that chart. Usually don't like charts, but this one's nice because you can work an hour and you're probably going to get nothing. You might get something worth a gold piece. So that just shows you like the adventuring life, it might not be safe, but it's much more exciting than mining, where you can spend an hour and you have a 1 in 100 chance of getting something actually worthwhile. There is a room with a couple of giant rats that you will have to fight. And there's a fast-moving stream. If you enter the fast-moving stream and you fail a DC 10 Dexterity saving throw, you die. That's what it says. It says.
No, yeah, it's true.
The river picks you up and carries you down into the
thousands
Underdark.
of feet,
thousands of feet, plummeting. So, yeah, be careful there. So, this is a 3-level dungeon. The first time you actually run through a kobold, there is a bridge made of planks over this humongous pit, and 2 kobolds are on the underside of the planks, attempting to weaken them so that anything bigger than a halfling that walks over them will fall. So the players might not see them, and they might not see the players. But it's an interesting thing, right? You never find the kobolds actually making the trap. It's a nice setup, but you as the DM are going to have to think about how you're going to run it because the text doesn't tell you how.
Well, and what I do like about this, right, is this is design that if it doesn't get used, it's okay. And it could come up later. Like you might end up on the lower levels looking up to see them. Right. So it works here, right? Like you could literally, 2 ships passing in the night don't see each other. It's okay. Yeah. Or it could be hilarious, or you might walk back to look for something, and you go, hey, make another check.
But this is one of those times where, as the designer, you need to ask yourself, what's the most likely thing to happen? The most likely thing to happen is the players will make a perception check and they will see these kobolds. What are they, and they're not necessarily going to attack right away. So they might talk to them. What do these kobolds say? If they let go, they're going to fall to their deaths on the underside of these planks, because it says if they take damage, they fall and die. Mm-hmm. So they're in a precarious situation, so they're not going to attack. And so if the players say, "Take me to your leader," what do these kobolds do? You have to think of that as the DM because the text doesn't. And
they do have further at the beginning. They do have a set of quotes that kobolds can say if you capture them.
Yep. And so if you want to use those rather than after they're captured, because you're not going to capture these dudes. They're either you either pull them up from under these planks or they fall to their deaths when you damage them.
And they do have some fun things, like they'll say Trex led us here. He has wings like a dragon. They don't speak dragon no more.
Yeah.
Says miners want their mine back. Trex wants something better in return.
Yeah.
So there's some neat little pieces there.
Yep. And so it's very easy to turn this into a very social sort of encounter or adventure, because probably you will be talking most of the time with the creatures that you find. So if you do go to the kobold leader, he has strapped to his back fake dragon wings, and he speaks with an incredible vocabulary. The reason why is he is possessed by the ghost of a sage, and the ghost only wants to get to a place where he can get out of the kobold body into a body that he can use better. But it doesn't really tell you what the ghost wants beyond that. He's a sage. He's not like an evil mastermind. He traveled the area picking up and examining wildlife and the flora and fauna. So, and he has a sack with him containing all of his specimens, but it really doesn't say this is what he wants beyond this encounter, other than to get to town and to possess someone else.
Yeah.
If he does that, then what? That's what I want to know. And the adventure doesn't tell you, so DM, make it up. Maybe he turns into an ally of the characters. Maybe he turns into a threat. We don't know.
And I
You
think
do
that's what's
though.
missing, right? It's just a couple of bullets that would say,
Yeah.
if the characters treat the sage well,
Yeah.
he can advise them and they can turn to him for knowledge,
Yeah.
as long as they don't ruin his secret of whoever he's taken over. Or
Yeah.
if he's an enemy, he could move from body to body and
Mhm.
eventually end up in one of the other foes. Maybe it's the Zentire, maybe it's someone else, and undermines the characters, right? Use them as a
Right.
foil at times.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
if he gets to the Durgar
Hmm.
and possesses one of them, he could become an ally and bring knowledge of Chardalyn to the Durgar. We just don't know, but it's something as the DM. It's a wild card you can play with, so think ahead about how you want to play with that.
The other thing is that a ghost is CR4,
Yeah.
so and has some frightening abilities, so to speak.
Right.
So
But
if it goes to combat, it's dangerous.
yeah, and I don't think he wants to fight. He just wants to keep trying to
Right.
possess someone. So again, play it to the best story that you can tell. There are a couple of cool little mechanical exploration things like bucket lifts to get between levels and a conveyor to get across a chasm from one place to another. But the big threat is a Grell that is hiding in a chamber, and the Grell is the main threat here. If the characters only deal with the kobolds and never find and deal with the Grell, when they go back to Termalaine, they can tell Oris, yeah, we cleared out the mines. And he says, okay, great. Let me go check it out. And if everything's safe, I'll pay you your money. And if you don't defeat the Grell or deal with the kobold problem, when he goes, he probably gets killed or gets possessed by this ghost if you didn't take care of that problem. So I like that the designer here thought ahead enough to have that be the outcome. So this is one of the shorter quests. I think there isn't a lot of fighting. There's not a lot of combat. It's probably going to be a quick fight with the Growl and then a conversation with the kobolds.
So one thing that's interesting here, design-wise, right, is given that the adventure wants to sort of give you these horror moments, I find that the Grell in this mine could be absolutely terrifying if you used it differently. In that there are these places where, one at a time, you're lowering yourself on a bucket with this shaft that leads down thousands of feet, super scary, and nothing happens there.
Mm-hmm.
And the Grell's just hanging out in this room in level 2, and it's like, if you put that Grell anywhere else,
right,
it would be really scary. Like it could. And then I think, if you even just change it to be a carrion crawler or give it, maybe even merge the stats, so it's not so brutal because it will remove one character probably. But if you use something like a carrion crawler that paralyzes, you could transform. If you want the horror piece, you could really dig into horror with that.
Yep.
I thought it was interesting they didn't do that here.
I mean, the way it's written, the Grell will not attack if all the characters are in the room. It will hide. Then when everyone leaves, it will follow them and try to grab them. But there isn't a lot of space to do that well with the map. So you can change the map a little bit if you need to make it so you do separate one character from the rest for at least a short time, because the Grell can then paralyze and
one thing I do for sure is, if you happen to, sometimes you have situations where the party has an NPC or two and they get a little old and you're like, how can that NPC move off? Oh, murder them with a Grell. Yeah. Like, this is where you'd want to run them through this and remove that NPC so you don't have to deal with it anymore. Have it be the first victim and the characters start, playing alien in the mine shaft.
Absolutely true. So, Teos, believe it or not, we are out of chapter 1 now. So next time we can move on to chapter 2, but we have to end there, sadly. Thank you all. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying that I think next time let's start with a sort of look back right now and take it all in, because we've gone through at the specific level, but I think it'd be good to take it in. True.
But until then, thank you all for listening. We appreciate your patronage if you are a supporter of our Patreon, or just happy that you're listening. Where can people find you on the internet, Teos?
I can be found on Twitter at AlphaStream, and my blog is alphastream.org.
You can find me on Twitter at Sean Merwin, or you can talk to both Teos and me at the forums at forums.misdirectedmark.com. Down with D&D is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. So, Mr. Abadia, what would you like to do now?
Let's slowly but surely, as we descend into madness, kill some monsters.
Some of us have already.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?